Hey YouTube, it's Charlie from Reader Turned Writer, and today I'm talking about my 10 favorite books from 2020. This is always one of my favorite videos of the year, and it's also really hard to narrow it down. I didn't count any of my rereads on my top 10 list, and I tried to pick ones that were kind of different from each other so that I didn't share like a whole bunch of thrillers or something, because I do read very widely and I like different books for different reasons, and so I wanted to make sure to show that in my list. The first one I wanted to talk about was Hope in the Mail by Gwendolyn Van Draanen. This is a nonfiction book, and I think that the subtitle is perfect for it, and it's Reflections on Writing and Life. And I would really recommend this to anyone who is interested in writing or wants to be a writer. It's very inspirational to see her journey and kind of see what she went through and just to hear her talk about it. And if you aren't wanting to be a writer, I still think that it would be an interesting read because you would get to see behind the scenes, and she's a very good storyteller. She has a lot of anecdotes in here, and she knows how to keep your interest even in a nonfiction setting. And she's funny. I read quite a few Agatha Christie's this year, but my favorite was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And I actually think this is my favorite Christie book so far that I have read ever. I actually even liked it more than The Murder on the Orient Express, and I would highly recommend it if you want to kind of get a feel for what her books are like or just want to have a good twist, because this one blew my mind. It was really good. I'm actually going to have my husband read it, and he doesn't read a lot of fiction books right now because he's really focused on other things, but he said that he would read it if I got it for him, so I'm excited. The next one I wanted to talk about was The Princess in Black by Shannon Hale. This is aimed at a younger audience than even probably middle grade. It's kind of like a chapter book, but it's a really cute chapter book. It has really cute illustrations. I thought the plot was pretty fun, even though it's pretty simple, and my kids loved it. And that's part of the reason I put it on here, is because it was probably their favorite read aloud of the year. And my 4-year-old, it's harder to get her to sit down and read chapter books with me. She loves picture books, and so this is the perfect kind of transition for her. And it also is Princess and Superheroes, which she absolutely loves, and I love how much she loves it, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series with her. I also really like Shannon Hale, so that's a bonus, and I think it's good for both boys and girls. I do try not to put books that are like in the middle of a series on my list, but I couldn't help it with Rhythm of War. This was my favorite new release, my favorite book from a series. I reread the other books in the series. There's 4 so far. This is the 4th, and then there will be a 5th one in a few years, and all of them are 5-star reads for me. I absolutely love them, and so I couldn't help but put it on here. It is a little bit intimidating, but I promise you that it is worth it to read the series because it's great. And I don't read a lot of epic fantasies, even though I read a lot of books. I haven't read a lot of epics, but I love Brandon Sanderson's epics. So I just love Brandon Sanderson. Another favorite was Caroline, Little House Revisited by Sarah Miller. And this is the Little House on the Prairie book, like the actual Little House on the Prairie book, because there's quite a few different books in the series, but it's focused on the one where they leave the little woods to go to Kansas, I think it is. And it's just from the perspective of Caroline, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. It just really, I really connected to it as a mother. I thought it was so relatable, the emotions she felt, some of the things she thought about Charles and his freedom to do things and different things, and just, it was just so relatable, and I loved it. And it made me so grateful to be a mother nowadays, and not back when we didn't have electricity and other, modern conveniences. And it also just made me glad to be a mother. It made me so happy to be a homemaker and to be there for my kids. I also cried a lot during this book, and I did want to warn, there is kind of like a sex scene in it. I thought it was very well done. Normally I do not read explicit scenes that are explicit as this one, but it was like not vulgar at all to me, and it felt like it really added to the story and to Caroline's character, and that it fit. Like, it didn't bother me. But I did want to warn about that in case that's something that people are bothered by. This one felt a little bit similar to me, but it was different, and it's All That Makes Life Bright by Josie S. Kilpack. And it says it's the life and love of Harriet Beecher Stowe, which is not exactly accurate of what it is. This is like a biographical, fictional account of Harriet Beecher Stowe's early marriage and motherhood, like when she first gets married and first starts having kids. And so it's just kind of like a snapshot of a portion of her life, but it was so good. This is one of my absolute favorite books of the year. I read it in December and I cried and cried and cried, and I connected. It was one of those books that was like relatable as a mother and a wife again, and especially as a mother who's trying to write and do YouTube and do my own creative things, but I also have kids that won't go to sleep or who need things, or I still have to make dinner, and I don't want to make dinner, and she never wanted to make dinner. It's like, it's just really relatable in that way. It does focus on her marriage and her relationships and kind of how she was able to find a balance between her responsibilities as a wife and mother and her creativity, more than on anything to do with slavery, although that is in here a little bit. There's also at the end really detailed chapter notes about what was accurate and what wasn't in the book, which I thought was really interesting. I thought it was beautiful. I would highly recommend it, as long as you know kind of what it is going into it. On a totally different track, I really loved Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson, and I don't actually own this one, but I thought that it was a really fun thriller. It's probably one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read. It is an adult thriller. It does have language and some sexual references and things in it. Nothing that bothered me too much, but enough that I might not ever own the book. But it was very gripping, very tense, and exactly what I wanted out of a thriller. I was really in the mood for a thriller, and it really gave me exactly what I wanted. And the twist at the end was pretty good because I was trying to figure it out the whole time and I actually did not see it coming. So yeah, but I never see things coming. But it's definitely a good one if you're looking for a good thriller. I think it's a pretty popular one, so you might have already heard of it. One that you probably haven't heard of that I absolutely loved, that hardly anyone is talking about, is called Splinters of Scarlet by Emily Bain, and I found her on Instagram as well, and I really loved it. I can't wait to read. I think she has one other book right now, and I'm gonna go read it this next year probably. Splinters of Scarlet is like a historical fantasy where the magic, as the characters who have magic use their magic, it builds up inside of them and eventually kills them, but then they use it, to kind of get ahead, or like just to try and survive sometimes even, but then it ends up killing them if they use too much of it. And so it's kind of an interesting idea and concept that's explored throughout the book, and my favorite part of it was the mystery, because there's kind of like a mystery that they're trying to solve all throughout, and I thought that was very well paced, and I love a good mystery, and all of the elements work together really well to just make me really like the book, and I loved the characters and the side characters, and I thought it was a really fun read. I would highly recommend it. And then I don't actually own the hard copy of this, but I do own the first one that's kind of in the same universe. This is The Match by Sarah Adams, but my favorite was The Enemy by Sarah Adams. These are both adult rom-coms. The Enemy is a hate to love rom-com that kind of the hate section. I like hate to loves if they're done well, but it bothers me if the hate part is like too intense or too much. Or if they're too mean, where in this one it didn't feel that way, because the hate part was like this competition to see who was better, that was like kind of left over from high school when they liked each other but didn't want to tell each other, so they would just like compete with each other and do pranks on each other. I loved the prank aspect of it. I just thought that the romance was really cute, and I really like Sarah Adams' writings. She's a little bit cheesy, but in a good way, and they're exactly what I want when I want to read a fun, light romance. And I would highly recommend her rom-coms. I think she also writes Regency romances as well. So yeah, she's a self-published author, and you can go check her out on Instagram or go find her books if you want. And then the final one I don't own yet either, but it was Eleanor Oliphant is Perfectly Fine by Gail Honeyman. And of course this went all over BookTube, so I put it on my list, and then it was sitting on my list for forever, and I finally got to it this December, and I thought it was amazing. It's kind of about Eleanor. She's not perfectly fine, of course, and she sees the world differently, and she just has a lot of issues in her past that she has to work through. And as she does that, she's able to kind of open up out of her shell and actually start like making friends and making changes to her life that are good. And I just loved watching her journey. I honestly just fell in love with Eleanor. I thought her character was so well written, and I just loved her so much, and the ending made me so happy. So yeah, I would highly recommend all 10 of these books. Now really quickly, I'm just going to read from it. I just wrote down all of the 5-star reads that I had on my computer. I'm just going to read them to you. I'll start with the ones that I reread, because I reread a lot of books this year that I really enjoyed. There were some that I didn't love that I reread, but most of them I really liked. Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer and Snapshot by Brandon Sanderson were all rereads of mine that I loved. And then I also read Dawn Shard, which is a novella that comes before Rhythm of War, and I gave it 5 stars as well. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe I read with my kids. The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I love the Screwtape Letters. Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. I really love the poetic feel of that book. Love Your Life, Not Theirs by Rachel Cruz. I really love Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz. The Goose Girl by Shannon Hill. The First Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I read that with my kids as well and they loved it. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It's my favorite Jane Austen book. Atomic Habits by James Clear. I love Atomic Habits. If you're going to read one self-help book, that's the one that I would recommend. Avatar: The Search by Jean Luen Yang. And this is a graphic novel kind of following the end of the Avatar: The Last Airbender TV show, where Zuko and Aang and Katara and everyone go and find his mother. That's why it's called The Search. And I read this with my kids as well because we watched the TV series and they loved both the TV series and the graphic novel. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. A Face in the Shadows by Susan Evans McLeod. And this is kind of an alias historical fiction that I love. Holes by Louis Satcher. And that was a reread for me. And then I hadn't read Small Steps by Louis Satcher, and it's like the sequel to Holes, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it more than Holes, which I have always really liked Holes. When I was a child, I really liked it. And Small Steps is very different. It like has a very different feel to it from Holes, but I loved it. I thought it was so good. I loved the main character. We follow, I think it's I don't remember, maybe Armpit. I can't remember now who it is that we follow. I can like picture in my head, but I can't think of his name. Anyway, we follow him, so it's like different main characters, but I just thought it was brilliant, and it is kind of more of like a diverse read because the main character is black and struggles with a lot of racist situations throughout the book that just break your heart for him. The Borden Murders by Sarah Miller and Miss Spitfire by Sarah Miller, and both of those, The Borden Murders is like a crime nonfiction, like looking at the actual, it's like a famous case. I don't know, and I wasn't sure if I would like it, but it was done really well. It wasn't gruesome or anything to read about, and it was super interesting. And then Miss Spitfire was Helen Kellen's story from the perspective of Anne Sullivan, the teacher that like helps Helen Keller. I've always really liked Helen Keller. It's kind of like a middle grade look at it. I read the Fire and Steel series by Gerald Lund, and there were 4 books that I rated 5 stars out of that series. The Storm Descends, The Shadow Falls, The Proud Shall Stumble, and Into the Flames. And it's kind of a look at Hitler's rise to power, and it's really a really interesting series. Then I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes books and short story collections, and 2 of them I rated 5 stars. Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and His Last Bow. One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, and this was a really fun YA thriller. Batman Year One by Frank Miller, and TMNT Changes Constant by Kevin Eastman, and that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the very first one that ever came out. I've read quite a few different graphic novels, but those were the 2 that I liked the most and rated 5 stars. Then some middle grade books. Front Desk by Kelly Yang, Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. That's like a mystery book that takes place, a middle grade mystery that takes place at a girls' boarding school. Front Desk is like about an immigrant girl who comes with her family and shows her struggles. Inside Out and Back Again by Dana Lee. That was also a book about an immigrant, but it was told in verse, which I didn't think I would like, but I actually really liked that format. And then I had An Echo of Things to Come by James Islington. That's part of an epic fantasy trilogy that I really enjoyed. Across a Star-Swept Sea by Diana Pietrafund. This is a retelling of The Scarlet Pimpernel, where the Scarlet Pimpernel is a girl, and it's like a science fiction of the Scarlet Pimpernel. It's also kind of the sequel to For Darkness Shows the Stars, and it's like it has a couple of the same characters, but they're not the main characters, and it like takes place in the same world. So it's kind of fun to make those connections. And then The Match by Sarah Adams, which you saw. and A Ceiling Made of Eggshells by Gail Carson Levine. And this is a middle grade historical fiction following a Jewish girl who, I'm trying to remember if it's the 1700s, I think maybe the 1800s. And I love Gail Carson Levine's writing style, and I thought it fit perfectly with the story. I love the main character, and I learned so much reading the book. If You Don't Know the Words by Bianca Moraes, and this was just so heart-wrenching and heartwarming at the same time, and very captivating. What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon, and it's like a historical fiction that takes place in Ireland around the time of the Revolution, and it has time travel in it, and it's a romance. Yeah, it was good though. And Snape, A Definitive Reading by Laurie Kim. This is a kind of a nonfiction analysis of Snape's character throughout the Harry Potter books, and it's very well done. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle by Betty McDonald. This is another read aloud that is like kind of a chapter book that my kids really liked. And finally, Renegades by Marissa Meyer. And it's Marissa Meyer wrote the Lunar Chronicles. This is like her superhero series. I like the series. Renegades is my favorite. So yeah, those were my 5-star reads and my top 10 of the year. Let me know what your favorite books were in the comments below, even if it's just 1 or 2 of your favorites. I would love it to hear about them and talk more about books with you in the comments. If you're interested in following my reading journey more closely, you can go check out my Goodreads. It will be linked down below, and I do a book review for every book that I share. I also have a Twitter that I try to post to at least daily, although that's kind of like whatever I feel like posting. I also have my Instagram where I try and post really regularly there about bookish and writing things and share things about my writing and reading journey in my story. So there's lots of ways we can connect down below, so don't forget to check out that comment box if you're interested in any of that, and hit that like button if you liked this video. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one.